CBSE Board, Class 11, History, Chapter 3, Part 4, Audio by Renee Matthew. We saw the meaning of the word feudalism and also how and from where it emerged. In the economic sense, feudalism refers to the agricultural production, and that is based on relation between lords and peasants. But what does feudalism mean as a whole? Holistic meaning is the economic, legal, political, and social relationship which existed in Europe, especially in the medieval era. But in the economic sense, it is the kind of agricultural production and also the relationship which was maintained between the lords and the peasants. So you should be very careful about the meanings. Now what happened was that, what is the meaning of this agricultural production and the kind of relationship that they always had? The later, that is, the peasants, they were the ones who collected and they were the ones who took so much of trouble to cultivate their own land. And also the land of the Lord. Not only their own land, but also the land of the Lord. The peasants always performed and did labor services for the Lord. So when it is labor services, it doesn't mean that they did and they worked only on land. No, that is not the meaning. They did labor services and also they did all the other kind of services also. So in exchange, what did the Lord do? They gave military protection, that's all. Just protection, military protection, not anything else. They also had judicial control over peasants. So much of dominance and authority was there. Judicial control is something which is beyond words. Judicial control was there. So feudalism was not economic. It is something which started as an economic process. It had economic sense in the beginning, but then it went beyond the economic meaning. And that covered later the political, the social, and all other aspects of life as well. And that is when feudalism became very dangerous. What something started as economic gradually started expanding in both social and political aspects of life. And that is something which posed as a threat to the life of the peasants. So the roots of feudalism have been traced to the practices which existed in Roman Empire, and also we saw it expanded after that because of the invasion of the Germanics, the German tribes. And also it is something which evolved in France during the age of the French king. The king's name is Charlemagne. It emerged during the time of this king. Feudalism established a way of life in large parts of Europe. And then only it started evolving. It emerged later completely in the 11th century. Till then, it was in some other form. It was actually establishing. It was only progressing. After this, it started emerging and it just went on to have the full view. Now we need to take a look into France and England, the feudalistic practices or how it evolved in France and England. Okay? Now look at this picture. This picture talks a lot about the society, the feudalism in all these places, how they dressed and all that. Gaul. Have you heard of this province? It is a province in Roman Empire. It had two extensive coastlines, mountain ranges, long rivers, forests, large tracts of plains which suited to agriculture. This was the blessing of the Roman Empire with coastline, mountain ranges, rivers, forest, everything was there. So that is about the Gaul, which is a province of the Roman Empire. When we talk about Franks, Frank is a Germanic tribe. Now Franks gave their name to Gaul, making it France. So actually the original name was Gaul. And this particular name was given to Gaul, and that is how Gaul became France. Did you understand? So from the 6th century, this particular region became a kingdom. And that was ruled by the Frankish or the French kings. the Frankish kings. They were originally known as Frankish kings. And they were actually Christians. Later they were Christians. Of course, the French had very strong links with the church, and it got strengthened when in 800 the Pope actually encouraged King Charlemagne. Pope gave King Charlemagne the title of Holy Roman Emperor. That is when everything started with a dominance and an authority, because of the strong link. So when you pacify the church, this is the importance. You get the title. So the king got the title Holy Roman Emperor to ensure his support. Okay, so this is what happened. This is the beginning which took place in France. And remember all these names, Franks, Gaul, and all that. The evolution of the name is very important. Now there's a picture that I've given here. Gaul, a province of the Roman Empire. Look at it. It is given in the map, the old map. To have a clarity map, you can check the Google also. There are a lot of maps which give a clarity on where it is. This is only for you to understand where it is. Across a narrow channel lay the island of England, Scotland. It was across the narrow channel, this particular island was. And that was in the 11th century. It was conquered by a duke from the French province of Normandy. So slowly the French people are slowly creeping into England and Scotland. Did you understand that? So as the French people focused their attention on England and Scotland, the French duke was clever enough to get a province of Normandy, and that is how the invasion starts. It brought about a great change in the lives of the people also. People actually changed a lot because of all these things. Okay, when the French came and occupied England and Scotland. Now we need to look at the three orders. We saw a briefing on England and Scotland. France and England. Now we need to look into the details of the three orders. What can you understand from this picture? King, nobles and knights, right? European feudalism. French priests believed in the concept that people were members of one of the three orders. So depending on your work, you were placed into one of the orders. That is what the French priests believed. Now, why do we say priest? Because everything was decided by the church, and the church had a great authority over the state affairs. So French priests, of course, they also had a share in the rule, and they believed that a person was a part of the society based on their work. Now we have a quote from a particular bishop who said that, "Here below some pray, others fight, still others work." Some will pray, some will fight, some will do that and this, but others should work. That was a statement. The three orders of society was broadly classified into clergy, nobility, and peasantry. These were the three orders, these were the three divisions. The clergy, nobility, and peasantry. The second order, the first order we saw, now it is the second order, the nobility. We need to look at the nobility first. What were they? How did they do things? How did they dress and all that? Priests always placed themselves in the first order and the nobles in the second. So you will be having a question. If the nobles belong to the second order, who will come in the first order? Of course, the priest came in the first order and nobles in the second. The nobility or the nobles had a great share of role in social processes. They played a central role in social evolution, that is, in society. Why was it? Because they controlled land. They had a huge dominance and authority over huge vast of land. Now, this control was the outcome of a practice called vassalage. We learned that in the Mongol Empire, vassalage. Okay, control of land. So the king of France were indirectly linked to the common people by vassalage, similar to the practice among the Germanic people, and of whom the Franks were one. So if a common peasant, suppose, satisfy the needs of a noble, the noble will say, "You have satisfied my needs, so now I will report this to the king and you will be in good connection with the king." The nobles served higher nobles and the higher nobles served the king. So when you satisfy a noble, you are indirectly satisfying the king. That was the idea. So that was done through vassalage. There were very big landowners, the nobles. All these were vassals of king. They were like the vessels, or they were the conducting vessels of the king. And peasants were vassals of the landowners. So that was the hierarchy. That was how the link was there. The peasants were not directly linked to the king. It is indirectly. But if the peasants failed to obey the rules, definitely they will come under the scrutinization of the king. A nobleman always accepted the king or the ruler as a seigneur, that is senior. And they always made a promise to the king, that is to the Lord. Lord was derived from a word meaning one who provided bread. So if they don't satisfy the needs of the king, they will not be provided with bread. They will go hungry, and that is why they are indebted. And the king was supposed to protect the vassal and also to be loyal to him. It was like a bond where the peasants or whoever comes under will have to provide all the needs to the higher authority, and in return what is given? Military protection. So we have to be loyal to our senior or lord throughout our life. That was the idea. This particular relationship was not that, okay, I will serve you, you will serve me. It doesn't end there. Please make a note of that. It always involved elaborate rituals and exchange of vows. A lot of promises were made between this relationship. There was a lot of under processes which were happening. Rituals were there, and that too it was taken on the Bible in a church. So they brought in religion in between. They brought in God in between. That was the practice. So they say, in the name of God, we are doing this. So during this particular ceremony, the vassal received a written charter. So when you're working for a lord, a written charter was given to the vassal, or a staff, or even a clod of earth. Okay. So some property was also given to the noble as a symbol of the land that was being given to him by his master. So suppose the nobleman is given a land by his superior, a written charter, or a staff. What is a staff? It's like a rod that the people carried. The rod that they have. The bishops and all will have a rod in their hand, right? That is staff. It is known as staff, the holy staff. Or even a clod of earth, a small symbolic representation saying that we are giving you land. That was a kind of vow and exchange, because there was no proper formulated documents which were available in those days. This is how they always made promises. Okay, the noble is represented in this particular picture. Now, what were the privileges that the nobles always enjoyed? These points are very important. The nobles had absolute control over his property in perpetuity. Always, perpetually, throughout the year. Every time the noble had absolute control in every way over the property. He could also raise troops which were called feudal levies, like military army. He could raise his own troops. He could actually feed them and also raise his own troops. He had his own court of justice. Whatever happened, he will not be liable to punishment. He had his own court of justice. Law was also in his hand. And he could even coin his own money. He could make his own money. That is, he could coin his own money. The form of currency, the form of exchange of money, everything was coined by him. And look at the law, the hold over law. He was known as the lord of all the people settled on his land. Whoever settles on the land, everybody will have to call him Lord, because he is the bread giver. Of course, he owned vast tracts of land, which contained his own dwellings, his private fields and pastures. Everything was there in the tract of land. Everything was there. The dwellings, and in these dwellings, his workers always lived. Okay? So his private fields were there, pastures were there, homes and fields of the tenant peasants. Everything was within those land. His house was called a manor, and his house was, of course, it was like a palace because of the richness and luxury which he had. So everything came under him, and he lived in a separate place called manor. Look at this. This is how the division was done. His private land were always cultivated by the peasants. He did not do anything. And the peasants were expected to act as foot soldiers in battle, not only cultivate on the land but also double work, act as foot soldiers in battle whenever it was required. We saw that he was given the right to raise his own troops, right? Right? Levies, yeah. So the king gave the right to the noblemen to raise their own soldiers in battle whenever it was required, apart from working on their own farms. And remember that the peasants couldn't say a no, you had to do it. That was a command. Next comes the manorial estate. It is a very important part of this chapter, which will be dealt in the next audio.